Stories in Stone, Luna's Royal Guard. By T.D.R. Rock Solid Experiences. Stories in Stone, Luna's Royal Guard. By T.D.R. Rock Solid Experiences. Twilight offered a prayer to Celestia that she would not explode on the way home. The Apple family reunion had gone quite well, though this was the first time she was able to see it in full swing. The food she had been offered the first time was dwarfed by the massive meal that was there this time. She had not seen as much of Applejack aside from the greeting when she arrived, before the rest of the family swarmed over them both with questions, chatting, suggestions for trying new foods and askance of how she liked it in Ponyville. There were a few rather off-hoof comments that brought some laughs from the mostly farming ponies, and she knew she was being hit on by a few of Applejack's cousins, though it was all mostly polite, if loud. After a few hours, and more food than she ever wanted to look at again, she found Applejack and let her know she was heading out. Spike opted to stay a bit and help clean up. Though if he meant the dishes, or what was still on them, she had no idea. Where he put it all never failed to surprise her. Applejack was a bit disappointed to see her go, but knew she was in the middle of studying something, and aside from her usual offer of help if needed, let her go without too much fuss. On the way back, she had to smile thinking of how Applejack's family had all but adopted her the first time they met. Perhaps she had come at the right time, though she still believed that I might have gotten into the apple brandy a bit much that day. Normally she was not as generous to people randomly showing up on her farm. Not to say she was hostile, but there were more than a few no trespassing signs around the orchard. Pushing open her door, she all but fell over herself onto the floor, groaning loudly at the pain from her overeating. She had sworn never again last time, and well, that did not work in the slightest, particularly with the excitement of the gathering. Her gaze fell on the crate as she pushed herself to her hooves again. She lights a few more candles about the house. The moon's light showed her the way home, but inside it was still too dark to see much. Maybe finding out a bit more about the weapon would take her mind off her belly. After all, it was still early, by her standards anyway. She was correct in that the distraction of setting up the spell kept her mind off her tummy, though she took a quick visit to the little pony's room before trying to cast the spell again, not knowing how long she would be watching this time, and not wanting to stop when nature called. She settled in, looking over the glimmering blade, her head tilting. Was it blue before? She moved closer and the faint blue glow faded. She backed away and the blade lit up again. Not enough for it to shed any light, but very noticeable as an outline. If the room was darker, the blade would clearly be seen. She glanced behind her and up, seeing the full moon shining into the library. Twilight smiled at figuring something else out about the waning moon. The blade was gifted, and likely enchanted, by Luna herself. It was little wonder it would react to the moonlight somehow. She moved back to the other side of the table so she did not block the moonlight from her window. She looked closer, seeing that the light was collecting around the weapon, dancing over the blade, giving it the soft blue glow. She smiled, greatly impressed at the subtle, yet beautiful magic, though she still could not figure out the purpose of it just yet. It did not seem to be combat-oriented, and the glow was too soft for a light spell, best to find out from the past. She cast the scrying spell again, letting the world around her fade as she was thrust suddenly into the grey unicorn again. Line of dashes. I said, "What is your major problem, worm? Do you not understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? I said you will run, and by Celestia you will run, or I will end you." Tales of dragons that belched fire, and beasts that could rend a pony in half, creatures that would pull limbs off of ponies with their minds abounded as horror tales to scare children. As Gerard Enrique tore down the track along with a herd of other ponies, the short, squat, light brown-coated unicorn in the wide-brimmed fedora screaming at them all was, by far, more terrifying than anything they had heard in the tales. He trotted alongside the lot of them, dropping back to scream at any pony falling behind, herding them all towards a stable on the far side of Maria 51. The housing they were to stay at while they trained. Company halt. That means you maggots. Line your sorry flanks up. I want 2 rows, my little ponies. 2 and a few parasprite droppings cannot count that high. Then you best crawl back to whatever rock you were under and live there, because I do not want you in my guard. The short stallion paced before the group as every pony lined up facing him. More than a few were panicked, the rest looked around wondering what was going on. Gerard had been told tales of fearsome creatures like this by his grandfather, but he was completely unprepared for actually meeting one. The stocky pony's light brown coat had more than a few old scars. His mane and tail were cropped very short, and the black hair that was left bristled almost like some sort of bush or angry feline had been the idea for style. His cutie mark was of all things a bear. A very angry-looking bear that seemed ready to jump off his flank and attack anything it didn't like, which seemed to be everything. He wore an olive green harness that hung a short blade of some sort and was adorned with the markings of his rank. The strangest thing about the unicorn was his wide-brimmed hat. It had the chevrons for sergeant on the front, and there was a hole for his horn and another 2 for his ears to poke through, although he seemed to be missing one ear. His eyes were a bright blue, more so than Reek's, though they seemed to burrow into the skull of whatever pony's gaze he met, forcing them to turn away. "I am Drill Sergeant Stony Hooves. This is the 1st Company stable. I own your flanks from this point on, until you are proven worthy of the guard. Even then I do not think any of you are worthy of so much as spit shining the horseshoes of our real guard member. You will only address me by my rank of drill sergeant. And I will address you in any way I see fit. You will do everything I tell you to, and you will end everything you say talking to me with my rank. Are we clear?" There were a few muted affirmations and a few who were too shocked to respond or realize he was talking to them. A few at least caught on and shouted back with a "Yes, drill sergeant." What was that? I have heard louder farts from a bunny rabbit. What did they give me? Wet rabbit farts to train this time? Say it like your future depends on it, because make no mistake foals, it does. Yes, drill sergeant, well isn't that cute? But it's wrong. You barely moved up from a rabbit fart to warm manure, now louder. Yes, drill sergeant. Louder. Yes, drill sergeant. Still crap, but I suppose that will have to do. I don't have time to give you singing lessons. Now then, I notice a few of you have brought in play toys with you. I shudder to think the lot of you even knows which end of those things is the pointy end. Now then, you will dump that sorry excuse for what you think you will be wielding as a weapon on the ground right here. Unless of course you think you have the skills with which to use them. I will make a little deal with you brain-dead rock trolls. You come up here, give me your best little show, and if one of you manages to so much as nick my hat, I will let you keep the little toy you have. Heck, I might even bake you a cake. But since it's not gonna happen, you can forget the cake. Now WA chose first. Only 3 took the challenge. The few others with weapons simply dropped what they came with on the pile. Gerard did not really want to face the drill sergeant, but he also had no idea what would happen to his grandfather's sword if he left it in the pile, so at the very least he planned to try. The first mare had barely drawn her weapon when the item was knocked out of her mouth by the drill sergeant. He barely said anything, letting her pick the spear up again before it was sent flying once again. The earth pony was getting frustrated and went to get it again. Then she herself was knocked flying as she bent to retrieve it. That's 3. Drop the toy on the pile and get back in line. Next. That was not even fair. You didn't even let her pick it up before the 3rd time. Trust me to come to the defense of a mare. Oh, I am so sorry, pretty cold, that I am not playing fair. Maybe you can ask the diamond dogs or the dragon to go easy on you when you're out there. I am sure they will calmly have no problem with letting you go and pick up the weapon that they just knocked out of your grip. This is not a spar, my little ponies. This is to prepare you for a life or death situation. Fair is not in the vocabulary. You need to be ready to expect anything, all the time. Next. Gerard winced a bit. The other pony who had moved forward with him tossed his sword into the pile and stepped back in line, leaving Gerard up there alone. He exhaled deeply, striding forward, pulling the blade from the scabbard with his magic. Eyes locked on the pony in the hat as he bowed a bit before he slid back, leveling the blade, his eyes never leaving the drill sergeant. Well, seems one of you might know a thing or two after all. Not like that's gonna matter, but since you're the last one with any balls here, I might as well make a demonstration out of you. The sergeant stepped back, his own horn flaring as he pulls the thick curved blade out of its sheath on his side. A curie, odd choice. Gerard had never considered something that was more of a brush-clearing tool to be chosen as a weapon, though by the same token he also wondered how he was already on his back with that same weapon resting against his neck. The sergeant backed up as Gerard picked up his blade with his magic, still not taking his eyes off the other pony. He switched styles, holding the blade in his mouth, noting the smirk on the drill sergeant's face. Like before, he was not sure how it happened, but he was seeing stars, and his chin was crushed to the ground with a hoof resting on his head, that curved blade nearly poking his nose. He saw his own sword a few feet away on the ground and realized he was not even facing the group after landing this time. He was let up once more and he floated his blade over, taking the handle into his mouth again, gaze shifting to the pony's hooves, this time waiting for the attack. Even like this, he barely saw the drill sergeant move. His horn flared, as a green box of energy forming in the air in the arc of the sergeant's swing. The pony's eyes widened as his blade glanced off the hastily made shield, The drill sergeant recovered quickly and moved, bringing about another attack without leaving any easy opening. Gerard had already accepted this was going to hurt and had spit out the blade as the hoof caught him in the jaw. He gripped his sword rapidly with his magic and brought up swiftly before he crashed into the ground for a third time. He winds, his eyes widening as he looks up. The drill sergeant's face was very close to his, blue eyes searing into his own green ones. A tiny quarter apple cut had been made in the side of his hat brim. His own blade had whipped around to block the blow, but had not been quick enough. Well, now you're a clever pony. No pony has so much as made a breeze against my hat in years. Seems there might be hope for at least one of you. Granted, you cut my hat, so that makes you my new special friend. It won't be long till you wish you were not a clever pony. Back in line now, and sheath that blade. Now that this show's over, I want all of you lot to haul flank down to the end of this road. If I see some pony lagging, I will add a few more miles to the run. Now move. He let go of Gerard, watching him scramble back into line and take off running with the rest of them. "Ah, how cute, Ger. You made a friend already, and here I thought you were not the sociable pony. Stuff it, treat." Line of equals signs. The next 3 months had more screaming and running than Gerard had even thought was possible. Every single pony there had lost any fat they had and were well on the way to putting on muscle. They hauled rocks, peeled potatoes, went up hills, down hills, and ran, in rain, shine, snow, and half a dozen other weather conditions brought about by Pegasi guards, whose only purpose was to make the most inconvenient weather possible for those training. Out of the initial 30 recruits, however, they were down to 21 by the end of the second week. Most of the Pegasus had quit after being told there was no flying and they had to run. A few of the unicorns quit when the same limit was put on magic. The last couple left due to injuries and some of the training, thankfully nothing serious, but they would not be back for a while. Gerard nearly quit himself once. Being the drill sergeant's star pupil meant if any other pony messed up, he got their punishment as well for failing to provide a proper example, and if he messed up, the whole troop suffered for it. He was not well liked by the end of the third week, and the verbal and emotional abuse was wearing down on him heavily, as it came from more than just the drill sergeant now. Thankfully Rick managed to talk him out of it. Mostly by complaining that if he was putting up with this crap, Ger would be too for dragging him into it. "Don't pin this on me. I asked at the start why you were joining. You told me it was to attract mares with the uniform." "Yeah, there's still some mares in the stable, but I am way too tired to even think about chasing them. So it's moved on to a need to impress them. I mean, if I quit, word might get out I let some mares do better than me. And we can't have the fillies thinking my virile self is weak now, can we? Now, that is a reason to stay then. Just to see if you crack from the strain before I do. Ha ha." Line of equals signs. By the time they had moved on to the combat training, several more had quit or been injured, leaving them at 16. The last to leave had been an earth pony who had sunk so far into depression from the abuse, the physical labor, and reconditioning, that he had tried to take his own life. The sole remaining Pegasus mare had saved him from leaping off the roof of the stable. The sergeant had the pony sent to receive help, and spent the rest of the day yelling at the Pegasus for breaking the no-flying rule. From that point the squad had another target of the drill sergeant's attentions aside from Gerard. The Pegasus Starfall. She seemed a bit older than most of the other recruits, maybe in her early 20s. Her coat was light gray to the point of being silver, her purple mane and tail were streaked with darker gray though both were cropped short for the training, her eyes matched her mane. A dark amethyst. The cutie mark gracing her was a six-pointed star with a multicolored trail arching across her flank, like a shooting star, or a comet. To say she was not happy to be the sergeant's new special friend was an understatement. Since she saved the Earth Pony she had been lumped into Gerard's group along with Reet. Without last pony's attempt on his life, their numbers had been cut to 15, and they were all separated into 5 groups of 3 for the next portion of training. For the same reason the others did not like Gerard, they were not fond of Starfall either. The same rules applied to her as they did to Gerard. They both messed up something once, and only once. The 3-day drill the rest of the squad was forced to endure because of that screw-up made everything else they had done up to the point seem like a tea party. After moving into the next part of training the work eased up a little. They were still driven hard, but the sergeant seemed more content that they would follow his orders and toned down his aggression, if not his volume. The weapon training moved past the simple sparring within the group and into a whole different affair. Several other stables of ponies were brought in, as well as their drill sergeants. 3 other drill sergeants oversaw this training as well as a few normal guards. Each sergeant taught a different weapon: axes, spears, swords. Gerard and Starfall stuck with swords. Starfall wound up being just as good as Gerard, and quick to learn anything she was shown. She had a strange dual-bladed style where she used both her hooves and wings to hold the blades as well as her mouth. Reet seemed to have a bit of problem with swords and like some of the others chose a spear as his weapon in his case a brace of them. His skill in close was surprisingly good, but he could hit anything he flung the weapon at with accuracy that surprised even Gerard, who didn't think his friend had trained in anything. "Where the heck did you learn to do that, Reet?" "What do you mean?" "I am quite adept at using long hard things to hit small targets." Starfall's eyes narrow as she stares at the Earth Pony, as he sinks another spear into the target. I cannot believe that he just said that out loud. Unfortunately, I can indeed believe he said that. Starfall. And now I really do not want to know any more about it. The weapon training went on for a few weeks more before the groups were split into types. Gerard picked up on a few more tricks with his blade before then, but Starfall had proven herself better than he by the end of the sword training. He was sent to magic training with a mixture of other unicorns from the other units. Starfall was pulled aside with the other Pegasus. Reet and the other Earth ponies went off to some other sort of training. Gerard, however, was nearly thrown back to the Earth ponies' training as he could not even manage a simple attack spell. The only thing that kept him with the unicorns was the versatility he started showing with his shield spell. He could put the shields up with a thought, even the larger versions, as well as shape them somewhat into other forms, though anything more than just a simple flat rectangle or square took more effort than it was worth to make. At full power, it was also found that the shield could support the weight of about 20 ponies before it finally started to collapse as the strain became too much. Something like this would easily be useful tactically as a bridge or a temporary barricade. They proved useless for attacking. Even if he made the shield into the shape of a sword, it was locked in space where it was formed. Attempts were made to force him to learn other spells. The instructors first thought it was just failure to understand how the magic worked or how to use it, but after Gerard managed to recite a few theories and spells that the instructors did not know, they considered it a mental block. He had spent a great deal of his fullhood studying magic and knew a good bit about it, but could not access it in any way aside from the usual unicorn telekinesis and the shield. He considered the shield something he gained from his cutie mark rather than a spell, as it was different from any version of a shield any of his teachers or these instructors had seen before. Even after the training, he was not allowed to use what he had learned except when it was raining. Then he was required to keep a shield up over the drill instructor to keep him dry. Celestia helped him if the sergeant got wet. The final week was more paperwork, a mental exam, and a physical examination to see if they could handle a forced march in triple gear. This would be followed by a 3-day exercise that turned them loose into a section of the ever-free forest and expected them to survive. Reed had ace survival training, so Starfall and Gerard planned to simply follow his lead. Their own scores were not bad, but after Gerard mistook poison joke for something to aid in healing, and Starfall chose a toxic mushroom for dinner, it seems safer to listen to Reed. So what are the supplies they are giving us again, Starfall? 3 flasks of water, 1 meal of dried oats each, our weapons, rain and cold gear, 3 medical kits, and a flare scroll in case it gets too bad out there, or one of Everfree's resident monsters comes looking for a snack and it's bigger than we can handle. Gerard glances up as Reed trots back over carrying the intel bag each group leader was being given. Both Starfall and Gerard were fine with Reed being the lead, because he seemed to want to be in charge, and neither of them wanted that sort of responsibility. Over the few months of training, the trio had gotten to know each other well enough to want to continue their association even after graduation. I've got the map. The campsite for our group is in this section here. Reed unfolded the parchment, pointing at a small square on the map labeled 85. We are going to be the furthest group into the forest. That has to be some sort of compliment. It's like they are saying they can trust us to be the least likely to screw things up. Well, if we have everything, should we get going? It will take us most of the day to get there, and that's if we don't run into anything. Bad luck to say such things, Starfall, though I agree, we've been cleared to go whenever. No sense hanging about. Reed trotted back over to the drill sergeant, letting them know they were on their way to the site. Leaving the map with Gerard, he looked down at it, blinking lightly as 3 markers appear in their location on the map. The spell would allow them to follow their way to the site as a navigational aid, though part of the training was that the map would stop working once they reached their checkpoint, so they would need to find their own way back out of the forest. A few hours later, Reed and Gerard sat on the edge of a ravine, at a path leading down into it. Starfall had flown off ahead to find a trail up the other side of the rock wall, leaving the two of them alone for the first time in a while. "So any reason you have not been hitting on her since you first met?" "She's in mourning still. Her mate was killed in a battle with the Griffons a few years ago. She refused the money for her and her foal that is normally granted to a soldier's widow. Claimed she refused to take a handout. She enlisted and sought to work for a living. Left her daughter in the care of her sister to join. Foal's barely 2 years old. How the heck did you find all this out anyway?" "She barely talks to anyone. I have sources, plus I pay attention, Jer. She writes to her foal and sister every single night, talks to herself occasionally when she thinks no one's listening, and is usually crying when she's on watch. She's a strong pony, but stubborn. I could work on her and get her to open up to me and maybe do some things to take her mind off her loss, but that's not the way I do things. If she was looking for someone else, she would find them herself. She needs someone who's not going to be a one-night stand like I would. She does not show she's in pain about anything. She won't. She fits this little group fairly well. She's stubborn, I'm handsome, and you're hard-headed. I think you mean you're an idiot, Reet. You find us a path, Starfall. Yeah, it's right over here, follow me. Eyes off my rear, Reet, before I kick you. But of course, laddie. Puns now. I thought you were better than that, Reet. Hey, I can steal your shtick occasionally, Jer. It was nearing nightfall when they made it to the site. The place was little more than a small clearing of land, surrounded by trees with the old wooden pole jutting from the middle of the ground, etched with a faded sign marked 85. They moved about setting up a perimeter, gathering sticks and fallen logs to form a fire in the middle of the camp. The first night had Reed taking first watch as the others slept, then waking Gerard for the midnight watch. He then woke Starfall for the last. The second day passed uneventfully, aside from gathering food and finding a small stream for water. They took turns staying at camp and foraging, one remaining to make sure the fire stayed lit. While not very cold out, there was a chill enough in the air that the warm fire was welcome after trips foraging in the damp air of the forest. The final trip out for the second day was as the sun was setting. Starfall and Gerard headed out to gather more firewood to make it through the night. Reet remained behind, figuring the two could pick up sticks without his help. "So, Reet told me about what happened. I am sorry for your loss. Stow it. I have heard that from every pony from here to Haggis. I do not need pity. Not my intent to offer pity. I lost my father not long ago as well. Just because you hear it from everyone doesn't mean that some ponies don't know how you feel. Really, your dad leave you to raise a foal on your own too?" "Nah, just his goldfish. It died about a week later, so I suppose I didn't do too well with it." "Hey? Fine, I suppose I shouldn't snap at you for it. You're at least trying to be sympathetic. But I still do not want my business spread everywhere. Reet won't tell anyone else. I am rather surprised he told me. I suppose he figured if we were going to be working with you, it might be good to lay everything out first. Every pony's got a secret they want to keep from others." "True, but it's hard to get to know a pony if there's a major one keeping them from trying to be friends." "What makes you think I want to make any friends here?" Like secrets, every pony needs a friend or two. Be nice to think the ones I will be counting on with my life can at least be that. And here I thought Treat was the smooth talker. I've known him for years. It's only natural that some of his skill gets picked up. Even if I don't use it to be the biggest tail chaser in Equestria. Anyway, if you don't want to talk about anything, that's fine. Not too comfortable regaling ponies with my life up to this point either. But we will be here if you feel the need to bring it up sometime. Provided we are not late to get back, and the drill sergeant kills us all. Right, I will keep that in mind if I ever feel like gushing like an old gossip mare. We should have enough wood now anyway, might as well head back to camp. Entering the clearing, they both noticed something wrong right off. Reet stood where he had last been, staring into a now dead fire. The moonlight filling the clearing showed the scavenged food and their packs scattered everywhere, torn open. Gerard's ears perk at a low hiss emerging from the darkness of the bushes. Reet, what the hay is going on here? What? Gerard. Get over here, he's been turned to stone. Starfall backpedaled away from Reet in midair, the earth pony's expression frozen in a look of shock, facing the bushes on the other side of the fire. The hiss grew louder, along with an angry growl that sounded oddly similar to a demonic chicken. Starfall, get the flare scroll, sent it up. Gerard's blade was out and tilted as he watched the brush line in the reflection. He really hoped his grandfather was right. If you see something move, don't look at it directly. Use the reflection of your blade. Will that even work? She yelled out, hastily digging through the bags and the scattered contents. They used cockatrices in the Dragon War. My grandfather used to tell me how we killed a bunch of them with this trick. I think this might be one. Cockatrices have to meet your eyes directly to turn you to stone, and only they can reverse the stoning supposedly. I can't find the flare scroll. By Luna's gaze, where is it? Oh, buck me. Jura. Her voice cut off as the petrification slid back over her head, her wings fanned out in a panic. Starfall had lifted her head and met the gaze of the large chicken-like creature that slipped from the bushes in front of her. Its lizard-like tail whipped behind it as it hissed, quickly turning to Gerard. He raised the blade to cover his eyes, quickly blocking out its view, but still feeling his muscles try and stiffen. He didn't hesitate, and knew he couldn't. He charged, screaming out loudly with his eyes shut tight, slamming hard into the surprised beast, knocking it down with a loud squawk. The two struggled for a bit, the creature's claw digging a gouge in his shoulder as they fought. He finally managed to get atop the beast, shoving his hoof down on its head and driving its beak into the dirt before it so much as managed to glance up. The cockatrice continued to try and struggle under him. He magically drew his blade and pressed the tip to the side of the monster. The beast growled, though it froze, feeling the point of his sword pricking its side. Good, seems you do know what that blade means. Which means you are likely smart enough to understand me. Now Grandpa filled my head with a lot of old stories about things that turn people to stone. The main thing he mentioned was that unless you had a powerful unicorn nearby, only the creature that turned some pony to stone can reverse it. So here's the deal, you are going to turn both my friends back to normal, or I am going to put more and more of my weight on your head until that tiny brain of yours smooshes out of your beak. He leans forward a bit, hoof driving the bird's beak deeper into the ground. He could not see the bird's eyes, but he felt its gaze trying to turn his hoof to stone. I wouldn't do that either. You managed to turn me to stone, and you just get smashed quicker. Now change them back, before I need to clean your blood off my hooves. The bird seemed to whimper, likely from the pressure he was applying to its skull, though the stinging on his hoof stopped. It's right. Here? Starfall blinked, looking around, seeing Gerard perched atop the bird driving its head into the ground. She turned away quickly, shivering and moving behind the pair. Now the other one. The earth pony slowly regained the normal color of his coat and fell back on his rump with a huff, looking around confused. What in the name of Luna's dainty hooves was that? He took stock, seeing Gerard, and turned his head away from the bird moving behind the pair as Starfall had done. Oh crap, a cockatrice. Figures I would get blindsided. What the hey happened here, you two? Gerard didn't answer, his eyes narrowed, looking down at the top of his hoof and the bird under it. Thank you for your cooperation. But no one, and nothing, threatens, let alone attempts to kill, my friends. He shoves his hoof down, putting all his weight onto it. The bird screams out, the cracking of its skull filling the clearing along with the death cry, though the scream ends first. Blood and the remains of its eyes burst from under his hoof as it finally slams into the ground, the avian bucking hard underneath him, trying to squirm away even with its head turned to paste. He drives his blade through the beast's side, spearing the heart, before he rose off of it, its thrashing stilled save for a feeble twitch of its tail before it too fell still. Gerard sat back hard, staring at the corpse. He had never killed anything before, never really wanted to, but any fear he had, any reluctance, was gone the moment his companions were harmed by the bird. He intended to kill it, whether it cooperated or not. He exhaled hard, slowly rising back up to his hooves as the others approached him. Well now. I suppose this means I owe you again. One of these days, this little tally you have over me is gonna get cleared. The deal with Sylphie, and now I owe you my life too. Not sure who Sylphie is, but I do owe you my life, Gerard. Thank you. He shrugs a bit, tail whipping as he pulls his sword from the beast's side, cleaning the blood off on its pelt before sheathing it. It's nothing. I am sure either of you would have done the same if the roles were switched. And I thought I asked you not to mention that mare's name again around me, Reet. Why do you even remember it? You always remember the ones that hurt a friend, Makes it easier to know who to screw over. So should we send a flare up now? There might be more of them. Nah, cockatrices are solo hunters. Though this one's a little farther north than it should be this time of year. Reet looked up at the sky. The smell of blood though will attract other predators though. I don't fancy meeting the Maudicore out here. At the very least we should head back, but first. He moved over to the bird, drawing a knife and kicking the beast's body over onto its back. After a bit of work he sliced off one of the scaled legs, flicking it over to Gerard's hooves with the blade. Tuck that in your pack, give them a little proof you're badass back at base. I doubt you'll live it down from the drill sergeant, but we were nearly done with training anyway, and some sort of proof this camp was a dangerous one would be good. Though I do not relish the thought of heading back now. It's been a long day and a hike at night will not be pleasant. Gerard looks up at the full moon with a smirk. Maybe Luna will protect us on the trip back. We're likely are the only ones awake out here. We might be of interest for her to watch over. Awfully faithful of you to believe our sad little lives are important enough to garner the attention of the moon goddess Gerard. Line of equals signs. The trip back took far longer than the trip there, with no map and half of it stumbling around in the dark. Morning had come and gone and the sun had just passed noon when they exited the forest, nearly crawling back into base camp. They were not the only ones who had trouble either. A group had tossed up their flare the first night after one of their number had taken a bad fall into a ravine. Most of the other groups were back as well, though there were still some in the woods. No one believed the report the three gave until Gerard produced the blood-soaked claw. A bit of an investigation was made into it and all three of them were questioned and Site 85 was investigated. The reasons for checking it out were not explained, though most of the officers seemed tense until it was declared a rogue bird. Even with the dragon war so far in the past, the idea of a controlled cockatrice was enough to worry the older officers. Gerard's actions were commended, and he was to be promoted upon graduation. The remaining weeks of training went by rapidly, finally ending in a large ceremony with all the ponies' achievements and awards being granted to them, along with their duty assignments. They were given a week before they were to report to their duty stations. Much to his dismay, Reed was being assigned to a private sector near Manhattan, though at the least Starfall was going to be in the same location as Gerard, if in a different unit. The three of them hit a bar soon after the graduation. Starfall stayed with the pair a while before rushing over to meet her sister and daughter who came to see her. She introduced the two to Reed and Gerard, and like Starfall, her sister showed no interest in Reed. Honestly, am I losing my toucher? Has all that time I spent in training made me less of a stallion? Have I? Ooh, look at her. Hello lovely, what brings such a delightful merit into this cold night alone? Ignoring his friend's flirting, he sipped from his mug watching Starfall play with her foal, the little filly staggering a bit as she walked around the tabletop, baiting around her dress uniform beret, as Starfall spoke with her sister. A smile cracked his lips as he took another drink, his mind chasing ahead to what might become of them now. It was nice to have made a new friend, but with them all being separated, how well would that friendship hold out? Then there were the rumors. He shouldn't worry, but talk of forces massing along Equestria's borders continued to trickle in, and it was on the lips of most of the bar's patrons. War. Another war with the dragons. He shuddered softly, comforted by the feel of his grandfather's blade still pressed to his side. The blade's straight edge nicked and scratched from the battles it had been in. Skirmishes that had been going on for years. The official end of the First Dragon War was not quite 100 years ago. His grandfather barely out of colthood when he signed up to fight. The war ended and he married. After a time Gerard's father was born. His father followed rather closely in his grandfather's hoofsteps. enlisting before he was really old enough to do so and somehow managing to slip by the age check. He fought in the War of the North with the Griffons as well as skirmishes with several other factions. Somewhere along the way he met Gerard's mother, married then had Gerard. He never met his grandmother on his father's side, and he had never met either of his grandparents on his mother's side. His mother died not too many years after he was born, so he barely remembered her, just the funeral. Years later his father was killed in a conflict, and then his grandfather died. He spent the last few years of his life before training staying with another family, friends of his family's. After both of their deaths, was it now his turn to join the conflict? The constant war that his family lived in, seemed to thrive in. While his grandfather never spoke of his father, it was often implied that he was a soldier as well. Would there ever be a time of peace in Equestria? Would he live to see it? By the end, would he want to? His father was always tense when at home, like he wanted to be back on duty. He was never comfortable. His grandfather was the same way. Even after he retired, he always had to be doing something. He never wanted to slow down. Gerard looks down into the drink he had, annoyed at the deep thoughts rolling around in his head. I need a better drink. Line of dashes. Twilight blinked as Alois just hit again, breaking her from the spell. She looked over at the owl sitting on the corner of her desk, the room nearly dark as most of the candles had burned down. A small bit of parchment was lifted to her, bearing the Apple family crest. Unrolling it she looked it over and winced at Applejack's nearly illegible scrawl. From what she could tell Spike had passed out after eating more than twice his own weight in food, and would be staying at the farm tonight. Thank you for keeping an eye on Spike, Aloysius, though I think I should probably go to bed now myself. Please take this back to Applejack and then take the rest of the night off. She writes out a note thanking Applejack for letting her know and to just send him home when he wakes up. Lifting it to the bird who takes off through the window heading back to the apple farm. She yawns, feeling better at least, her stomach not screaming at her anymore. She stays up long enough to mark the events of the scrying in her book, making notes of the commendation, as well as some other interesting points, before blowing out the last candle and heading to bed.